And then when she locks into that other gear, it's just for everyone to try and keep up.
You're seeing a great career come to its beginning.
I really do think the sky's the limit. She has those levels and that ability as just a brilliant dart player.
Hello, welcome along to the latest edition of The Story of here at the MODUS Super Series on Pluto TV, where we delve into the careers of some of the stars of the sport. Tonight, we're having a look at Beau Greaves, the three-time world champion and the winner already at the age of 21 of 134 titles in her career, and that is only going to be an ever-growing collection as well. One of her adversaries on tour, rivals on tour, is Laura Turner. She joins me now. Now, in terms of what Beau's done, not just in terms of what she's done for herself, but what she's done for the women's game, even at her tender age of 21, is in some of the stages and some of the things she's done, perhaps at a time unthinkable.
Yeah, and she's really kind of raised the profile once again. I think you could probably go back to that first time when people started looking at women's darts. You know, you can't really dispute that Fallon made it really kind of put it on the map, but the levels that Beau has then now taken the game to, it's just, yeah, it is awe-inspiring. I think there isn't a woman player, or there probably isn't a player that doesn't appreciate just the levels that she can actually reach. And I agree with you in terms of winning stuff. I don't think we're even on the tip of the iceberg as yet. And I think her performances, she's still got some more massive ones in there.
When Phil Taylor was dominating in the PDC in the early noughties, he brought his game up to a level which was so much better than the field in terms of dominating, winning 8 world championships in a row. And then everybody else had to then try and catch up and try and get to the levels. Is there a feeling at the minute in the women's game that Beau has become such a dominant force over the last few years that players have had to try and catch her up and are slowly catching Beau up and getting to that standard which you need to get at to be at the pinnacle of the sport?
Yeah, I do think so, because obviously everyone wants to remain competitive. I mean, we look at the draw at the women's series and it's like, where's Beau? You know, you're trying to kind of avoid that from an early stage because you just know the levels that she can play. But then you can look at the other women on the tour now. You go back to when it first started, the levels have gone up year on year. Obviously, Beau has been one of those flag bearers for setting such high standards. But now, you know, you're seeing she was very, very dominant when she first came onto the women's series tour. But now you're seeing a few other names, a few new names that are actually, you know, picking up titles as well. Even just this weekend gone, we had Kirsty Vinnakainen picking up the first one. Okay, Beau then swept up the other 3, but you are still seeing that you know, they are raising their levels. It's just the level of consistency that Beau has, which is absolutely astonishing.
And the story of Beau Greaves has been something that's gone on for a number of years. We speak about how young players really have burst through. I know the Luke Little are one that everyone talks about, but to a certain extent, Beau Greaves was probably the first real young superstar that people forked out from a very, very young age. She was at the age of 10 when she started with reality TV. I think she was about 12 when the BBC used her for a segment on their Champions League when they started taking on PDC darts. She was perhaps the first player, male or female, that was touted as a top prospect from that tender an age.
Yeah, and I think the thing is sometimes you will see that in any sport. You will have people that pick out these really young, phenomenal talents, so those ones that you think are going to do well, but they still have to do it. And there is always that risk, obviously, that, you know, you don't quite, you get to a certain point and you've peaked and you don't quite make it to the very top end of sport. But like Luke Littler, you know, Beau Greaves has just got better and better and stronger and stronger. And as you say, there was a lot of people that were that predicted it as well.
There's a lot of predicting, but that was because she was doing a lot very young, and particularly on the youth circuit, it was a absolute domination at times.
Yeah, winning titles when representing England as a youth player, beating names that we're really familiar with now, the likes of Katie Sheldon, picking up the Youth World Masters titles, and then backing it up with more youth titles. You actually look at it, and you mentioned all the accolades she's won. I would say there's a high percentage of those that actually came at youth level, but she was playing still at a really, really high level. I think she was 13 when she made the final of the Jersey Open, which is, you know, in the kind of adult section as well. And that was one of those tournaments that absolutely everyone went to. So, yeah, she dominated the youth, but that's not surprising because the levels were, you know, very soon able to dominate the women's game.
And it's interesting because, look, we see now players of that age maybe more regularly take part in adult competition. But at that time, that seldom happened, particularly on the WDF BDO circuit, where players that young would commit to the senior side. It would always be you play youth until you're eligible to play youth, and then you move on to the senior game.
Yeah, you get some crossover, and you'll get more crossover now as well. But I think what makes it stand out is because she went very deep in those senior tournaments as well. So yeah, you might have a few younger players that think, oh, I'm here, I might as well play in the other one, but they'll make a first, a second, a third round maybe. But Beau was making it right to those like latter stages, as we say, from a really early age. So it kind of stands out as another string to the bow of Beau Greaves.
And then things progressed slowly but surely. And then at the age of 16, she would make her debut at the World Championships at the O2 of all places, just before lockdown. And that was the moment we realised, right, we know Beau Greaves is good, but now we're going to test that on the elite stage, the world stage.
Yeah, and she had to get past Australia's Tori Kewish. Then I think she faced Aileen de Graaf in the next round. And Aileen is, she's a very, very tough customer to try and beat on the Oki, especially those big stages. Got past her and then ran into the reigning world champion at the time of Mikuru Suzuki. But semi-final on debut at the age of 16, that was. I still think there was people that probably would have expected her and wouldn't have been surprised if she'd actually gone on to lift the title. But that was the first time of seeing her on that big world stage.
And then I think it's quite natural for people to then get really excited when you see somebody that young tear up a world championship the way she did. And then lockdown happened, then COVID happened. And particularly for the players outside the PDC, the 128, the Pro Tour system, it was a very difficult time. The landscape was very strange. When players came back, they didn't quite know what systems that they're going to come back to. They didn't quite know what tournaments to play in. And I suppose for Beau, there was probably a year, 18 months worth of development, which probably got lost because of A, the pandemic, B, the rules around the pandemic. And then when coming back, there was a lot of perhaps politics, perhaps wondering what systems, who's going to be running what after.
Yeah, it was a difficult time for a lot of players. Generally I think we then looked at what we could do to keep playing. We would look at the online stuff that really started to blossom throughout that time, but it's not the same as obviously playing in person. You don't quite I remember actually playing a mixed pairs tournament with Aaron at home, and we played against Beau was at the other end of it. So yeah, we have been. There were things we could do, but it wasn't quite the same. It was very much. It felt like you were treading water in terms of just keeping your arm going, keeping yourself motivated. And I will say there was a lot of players after the pandemic that just didn't come back to playing, which is a real shame for the sport as a whole. But for the women's game specifically, I remember feeling at that time that just weren't really quite sure where things were going to go, who was going to run the lead with women's darts, because obviously with the collapse of the BDO, was a WGF going to take over, and then will the PDC step in and obviously offer us more opportunities there? And I'm pleased to say the WGF stepped in and the PDC are offering us a lot more. But yeah, it was a strange time, and I think that a lot of players suffered.
And for Beau, it wasn't an easy time. She played in the initial women's series, which launched in 2020, but that came at a point where she really was struggling with her game. She's been very open about how dartitis has become something that affected her from a very young age. And it could have been so easy, particularly when you consider the landscape around that time. And as you said, a lot of players walked away from the sport, that there was a possibility that she didn't feel like she wanted to carry on, that maybe she just parted ways with the sport.
Absolutely. Yeah, I obviously can't really speak for her, but from what I remember seeing, there were times where it was a real struggle for her up on the Oki, and it was difficult to watch because you knew how good she was, and everyone wanted to see her kind of come through it. But the one thing I will always say about Beau, and what I really admire, is that she's learned from a really early age to do what she's comfortable doing. So if she's comfortable playing, she will do that. If she wants to play in a certain tournament, not another tournament, she will do that. She will make sure that she's comfortable before she's ready to kind of move on to the next move. And I'm pleased to say, obviously, as time went on, the dartitis that seemed to be more managed, and now we're just looking at an absolute phenom.
And it's interesting you say, because Beau has been at times selected what she wants to play in. She's always said she wants to play in things that she enjoys, and look, at her stage of life, she's got that freedom to do that, which is why perhaps for a little while we didn't see her play in the women's series, didn't play at the first women's world match play. But what she did find, particularly in the WDF, was somewhere she felt was home, somewhere she felt that she could enjoy her darts, and maybe just playing in those tournaments. Obviously, she had success as well, which helps naturally, but she was able to play in an environment where she felt comfortable. Maybe it was playing in those events which then bred her confidence again. Would that be fair?
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, and don't forget, these are people that we would have that we all grow up playing with as well. And I know she's obviously fiercely proud of the fact that she's represented her country on so many occasions. So and those are the people that you're travelling with, that you start to really associate with. You feel comfortable around, and you can kind of be yourself as well. So it's a combination of factors. But I just think being comfortable when you're playing is key to get the best out of any player. But Beau just realised it at such a tender age. That she just needed to make sure that she was in the right place and surrounded by the right people, and I'm pleased to say she has been.
And she would be a phenomenon ever since. Right, we're going to take a break. When we return, we're going to talk about a lot of titles in her career, the World Championship glories, and maybe what is to come for bow and arrow. Welcome back to the second part of the story of here at the MODUS Super Series. We're having a look back at the career so far of Beau Greaves. We were talking before the break about how the WDF was a safe haven, somewhere she produced her best darts. I remember commentating on the Isle of Man in March 2022, and she absolutely dominated those. I mean, when I say dominate the events, that players were lucky to win legs against her. That was how well she was playing. And you may remember the first WDF World Championships was played in April. So that event in March then led on to that first World Championship in that April of that particular year. And it felt like going into that first championship, because of what she did there, because of what she was doing elsewhere as well, she was really building a lot of momentum in a tournament which, because we hadn't seen too much perhaps since the COVID lockdown, people didn't quite know which direction the championship was going to go. No,
of course, and yeah, like you say, it was just strange times. But I agree. I think when we came up to that April World Championships, the preparation going into that, for me, she was really, really spot on. There wasn't many people, especially if you'd seen what was happening around the circuit, which again, not many people had, but seeing what was happening around the circuit, you would think, yeah, okay, she's the one to beat this year. She's definitely on top form. But until you get up there and you know how you're going to produce on the big stage, it was still a bit, we weren't quite sure, but yeah, no, there was kind of no looking back, was there?
And in the first game, she was in a bit of trouble. Veronica Ehash hit that big finish and put Beau under a lot of pressure. But once she got through that first game, where she did survive a little bit of a scare, it felt like actually that scare was probably the thing that kicked her into life perhaps a little bit.
Yeah, and sometimes as a player, that first game is always the worst. I think it was a 164 from Veronica, because it ended up being the highest that was produced by a woman player. But yeah, I just think, you survive the scare, right, okay, now let's kick on, now let's go. And we've seen it in other tournaments where it's been televised, perhaps hasn't had the highest average, or perhaps has, dropped a few legs, but there is just that other gear. And then when she locks into that other gear, it's just for everyone to try and keep up.
And it was a case of people trying to keep up, because from that point onwards, it was pretty much an onslaught to the field, if we're going to be honest.
Yeah, no, and that's what we've come to expect. As I say, she's just got that extra level. She's got the extra gear. She can just switch it on. But quite often now what you're finding is, that's there from the very, very start. It doesn't have to be built up anymore. It's just there. She's on it. You know that if you're going to have any chance, you've just got to, you've got to start and keep up with her. But it's proving more and more difficult, especially as the years are going on and she's racking up even more tournaments.
She played Kirsty Hutchinson in that final, and again, another dominant performance. And then when the winning double went in to seal her first World Championship title, there was a feeling at that particular moment, I remember being in the venue for it, there was a feeling, this is the beginning of something special. You felt this isn't just going to be a one-off. You're seeing a great career come to its beginning, this first real wholesome moment where we've seen this talent really come to the fore.
Yeah, and I don't think, I remember Kirsty's reaction as well, and I don't think there was anyone that just wasn't absolutely delighted for her, because she deserved it. She was by far the best player that year. And it's kind of that start where we were talking about it in the first half, where, you know, everyone thought that she had this in her, she was a future world champion, but then to actually realise that and, you know, start this amazing journey that, you know, we're only a few years into. I mean, she's just still early 20s and there's just so much more to come from her. But yeah, I agree. I think that was that key defining moment where you thought, right, we've seen you pick up a lot of other titles, but this is the big one. This is the one that everyone wants. This is the one that no one can take away from you. Just kind of kicked off everything.
And then suddenly when you win a world title, people then shift expectations, then the headlines begin to come in. And it was at that point the first women's world match play took place. Obviously, we mentioned before the break, Beau wasn't playing in women's series events. Do you think perhaps the introduction of the match play may have been one of those factors behind Beau maybe looking to go back into that circuit, because it was such a big prize, all the top players were there, and it just felt like a natural fit that at some point Beau would play at the Winter Gardens?
And again, it was just when the time was right for her. Obviously, she came up, as you say, after the match play, came over to Hildesheim, won all 4 events. And we're like, okay. Goes on to Wigan for the last 4 of the year, picks up the other 4 events. That's 8 consecutive events that she won all at once. And yet there is that amazing carrot that, wow, there's another televised tournament. At the time, the World Championships was the only opportunity for a female player to actually get on the TV, unless you were one of the ones that made it through to, say, qualified for the Grand Slam or qualified for the World Championships. But they're few and far between. So to have a dedicated women's tournament, I think, yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's anyone that wouldn't want to be part of it, and it was an opportunity. But then she won all 8 and put herself in a whole different position.
And she had to do that to get into the World Championships, and then she'll play Willie O'Connor, who actually at the time was having a little bit of a renaissance at that point. It was a tricky seed for Beau Greaves, or a tricky unseeded player for Beau Greaves to have in that first round. Yes, the score was 3-0 to Willie O'Connor, but that did not paint half the picture at all.
No, it really didn't. And I know she was disappointed not to pick up one of the sets, but everyone went 3-2. She pushed them all the way. And as you say, we looked at that draw when it came through and thought, actually, there possibly wasn't many other players that were unseeded that could have been more difficult, because Willie O'Connor, you know, he's just one of those solid, strong players. He was only just outside the seeded places as well. So it was a tough ask, you know, first time at the Ali Pali. And I don't think anyone can prepare you for the Alexandra Palace. Obviously, I haven't had the privilege to walk up the walkway in terms of being a player, but the noise in there, the atmosphere, and the fact that everyone was aware of who she is and what she'd been doing. There was a lot of support in the room, and I think she just wanted to kind of live up to those kind of expectations. So I was disappointed that she didn't, but wow, she played so well.
And then because of Beau's success, she then becomes a victim of that because the rules changed slightly. So at that point, she was able to play in both the WDF and the PDC World Championship. The rules then changed the year after, where players who haven't got a tour card or qualified for the Lakeside and Ali Pali have to make a decision. You can't play at both. You can either play one or the other. Beau decided at that point to play at the Lakeside. She wasn't a huge fan of the fact that she had to make that personal decision. But I suppose this goes back to what we were saying in the first part, that Beau will do what she feels is right. She won't go with the madding crowd. She felt at that point that at her stage of her career, she wanted to build up the World Championship pool.
Yeah, I mean, do you have to put them side by side? She was the reigning women's world champion for the WDF. She wanted the opportunity to go back and defend that title as well. And I can totally understand it. You know, Anastasia Dobromoslova back in 2009, she went over to the PDC, couldn't go back and try and defend her title after she won at the BDO Worlds. Beau didn't want that. She wanted to come back. She knew that it was a tough decision, I'm sure, because, you know, the opportunity that you would get by winning just a game or 2 at the PDC Worlds as a woman player, you know, we've seen it with Fallon. It goes exponential. The media pick up on it. But for her, the important thing was, you know, she wanted to be world champion. She wants to be a multiple world champion, and she's been loyal to that system as well. So, yeah, I mean, what a decision, you know, to have to make. It's an unbelievable position to be in, but turns out she made the right one because she went on to win again.
Has she also changed the moral compass, or what society says in terms of women playing men? She played here at the Super Series. She won a week. She didn't drop a game. The only player to ever done that. Broke the world record for a women's average, 114.56 against Kevin Painter. When this went out to record, she was top of the Challenge Tour, Development Tour, and Women's Series Order of Merit. Has she changed the norm in the fact that even 5 years ago, there was possibly a novelty element about women playing men, where people like Beau, people like Fallon have just made that normal commonplace now.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, there's as many women playing at that level, and I quite often refer to Fallon and Beau in the context of women's darts because I like the fact that it's raising the profile of this side of the sport. However, she's just a brilliant dart player. And full stop. She is just a fantastic dart player. So I think that's the key thing that everyone has to remember, because she's just pushing anyone that she plays. We've seen it, we've seen it recently. We've seen her at the Grand Slam. We saw, obviously, as we mentioned with Willie O'Connor, she has those levels and that ability as just a brilliant dart player.
In terms of the future, it feels like the way she's playing across the PDC systems, hopefully we get to see her here in the not too distant future. Does it feel like she's getting to a point where she's become so successful in so many places that there's going to be a point probably towards the end of the year where she's going to probably have them serious conversations as to what that next step is, short term, long term, where do I want to take this?
Yeah, I think at the moment she's almost in that perfect position that we quite often refer to, because she hasn't got a tour card, but she's done so well on the Challenge Tour that she can step up to the Pro Tour. So she's getting that experience as well. She's obviously doing development tour. She's got women's series. She can drop back in on the WDF tournaments as well. So and also obviously play here at the MODUS Super Series. So she's got all these options open to her. But as you say, there might be conversations. She might end up top of those two tables, Challenge Tour and Development Tour, and then there'll be other conversations to have. But ultimately, I'm confident that whatever decision is made, it will be the right one for her.
And the fact that the point as well with the women's game in general, Beau's brought the standard up, but everybody else has gone up with her. I mean, we've had a number of women's weeks here. Beau's never made a final of that in the past. Okay, she didn't play in the second one. You made the final of the...
Probably because she didn't play in the second one.
But what she has been able to do, look, we've spoken about her dominance, but we kind of going full circle, the conversation is actually, as a whole, what she has done is, because she's actually been so dominant, a bit like Phil Taylor back in the day, everybody else has had to raise their standards to be able to be competitive with her. And it's felt like after a couple of years of her dominating that circuit, not just is it Fallon, Lisa, but as you mentioned, people like Kirsty Vinakainen, people in and around the periphery beginning to improve time after time.
Yeah, I mean, quite often you could say inspirational. I see it as more kind of almost aspirational, because you want to be able to kind of compete. You want to go up there as a dart player and give your opponent a game and put yourself in a position to win. And you just know with the top players, if you're going to do that, you're going to have to start scoring big. You're going to have that more confidence, that belief that just because you hit the first 180, yeah, you can hit another one, and you can finish the leg out. So it's having that confidence. And when we're watching the likes of Beau, as you mentioned, and you go back over the years, we've had obviously Trina Gulliver, who's been here a lot, Lisa Ashton. There's so many names that have pushed on the standard, and Beau is now that current flag bearer for the rest of us to just try and raise our levels once again.
What is the ceiling? I know it's a very difficult question, but what is the ceiling for Beau Greaves? How far can she go? Is she a potential PDC major winner? Is she somebody that could dominate the women's game on a scale we've never seen before? Where do you think a career could possibly be defined in the years to come?
I'd argue she's dominating the women's game on a scale that hasn't been seen before. I mean, she's picked up 33 women's series titles already. So I think, that side of things, she is really a dominant force. However, if you just look at the UK Open, she was, 7-5 up on Luke Humphries, world number one, last year's world champion, absolutely cruising along. Yes, okay, ended up being 10-5, but I think there was people that may have predicted that it would have just been an easy kind of game for a player like Luke Humphries. That's where I see her. And I think what we're starting to see as well is that she's enjoying it. Mm-hmm. She's liking playing in these arenas, whereas before she's been a little bit apprehensive and kind of goes back to that playing with, in the women's series or in the WDF. Now she's like, yeah, I'm enjoying the Grand Slam. I'm enjoying playing at the UK Open. I'm liking these opportunities, and she's making the most of them. And I really do think the sky's the limit.
Can you see her mixing with the very best on a frequent basis in the PDC?
I can see the very best in the PDC not wanting Beau Greaves to be on their tour, because I think, yeah, absolutely. I think if she wants to, then she has got more than enough talent to mix it with the best of them in the world.
And I suppose the biggest thing for Beau is we know that all of us have had conversations about what she wants to do. But one thing we know about Beau is she's headstrong enough to do what she wants to do. And so whatever decision she makes, it's going to be hers. We know that for a fact.
Yeah, and she's obviously got a good support network around her. We often see her with her family, her father, her mother, her sister, her brother, Taylor as well. So, and, you know, she's got her management team. So she's got good people around to kind of bounce ideas off and get advice from as well. But ultimately, I think, you know, they're all there to support her career, and it's what she's going to want to do. And like I say, so far every decision seems to be pretty spot on.
It feels like we're only just at the beginning of the story, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I can't wait to see how it carries on.
Should be exciting. Laura, thank you very much. Thank you for watching the latest edition of The Story Of here at the MODUS Super Series.